Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Vincic from Securematics. First of all, thank you for taking the time out today to join our webinar. This, as you know, is a ongoing series around COVID-19 response. I believe this is session 4. We've had other sessions that talked about kiosks and some of the proximity tracing, location services, all the way down to compliance. And what we did is we promised that we would have another session specifically talking about compliance, and that's why we're here today. And we have a few folks on our panel today. So first is Evelyn Blanco. She is with Outlook HR. And so Evelyn, welcome.
Thank you.
She's definitely an expert in this field. I mean, if you could think about it this way, Evelyn, I mean, we're what, 9-10 months into COVID, and we've had to become fast experts. So I think we'll all claim we have the best answers possible, probably not every answer. So just temper it with that, right?
That's fair.
And we have Susan Martell, who's our HR person at Securematics as well. And one of the things we've had to do is, as a company, Securematics has had to respond to COVID-19 and all the regulations and all the things we had to do. So Susan has become, a fast expert on this as well. So welcome, Susan. And we also have Sam Fadala. He's with For Our Safety. And Sam is really our guy who, he's a consultant, but he's our guy who really can bridge the technology and the non-technology parts of the COVID-19 response. Right, Sam? So that's right. That's a very important role, because there are technology and non-technology solutions that have to come together. This is a very complex thing to deal with and address. And as we all know that even though the vaccine is rolling out, which is awesome, we're still going to have to deal with this environment for a while and all the regulations and so it's something we have to do ongoing. We just can't stop at this point. And the panel will also talk about what do we do after COVID a little bit, and Sam will lead us into that. So I know we have some new partners and on the line today. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about Securematics. Securematics is been around for 15-20 years. I've been here about 13 years running the company. We focus really on just 4 OEMs, Juniper, which is Juniper and Mist, Ruckus, Sonic Wall, and Pulse Secure. So we go very deep on those solutions, and they're really around the security networking, segment of the market. So we don't carry 10,000 vendors. We really go deep on those 4. The other thing that we do is we do a lot of revenue. We do north of 300 million in revenue. So we're large, so I don't want you to get the idea we're small. But since we're about 50 people, we could really have a conversation with you. It's not something that, you're relegated to a phone tree or some kind of impersonal response. Real humans. Let me see. Yep. And we'll be able to, take your phone calls, answer your questions, get creative with you. I mean, those are all important when you're looking for a distributor. And by the way, we look at our distribution part of the business as the utility part of our business. All the pick, pack, ship stuff happens like turning on your light switch. But when it comes to putting together deals or looking at credit or getting creative or helping you with a BOM or a solution, that's where we really shine. And that's why we're all here, to help you do that. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass it over to Sam. Now, this is going to be more like a conversation. One thing I don't like about webinars is that, there tends to be a lot of slide whipping, and trust me, we have slides, but I want to make sure that we have a conversation as we go, because I think the interaction is really where you see the most benefit. So I'll pass it over to Sam, and want you to take it from here.
Okay, thanks so much, Brian, and again, thanks everybody for taking some time today to share with us. And today, I mean, our goal today is to, with our HR subject matter experts on the panel and with myself, I kind of want to talk about HR I want to talk about some regulatory compliance topics. And go ahead and move to the agenda, please, Bailey. And again, this is session 4 in an ongoing series of what we're doing in this COVID-19 response, what we call the journey. So as you can see, we're going to dive into CDC guidelines, regulatory compliance, and this is meant to be an interactive situation. We're going to talk amongst ourselves, but at any time during the webinar, if anybody has a question, just go ahead and type it into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those questions as we go. So hopefully we will get those questions rolling in. Let's go ahead and put up the first. Before we jump into the journey, let's start off with a poll. This is always fun, I hope.
You forgot one. It should say the Uber Eats card, right?
Exactly. We should have done that. Okay, awesome. I love it. So we've got a lot of knowledge building folks, and my boss made me. I love it. Okay, let's go into the first slide. I love it. It's great. So we've kind of approached this entire COVID response thing as a journey, and what we mean when we say journey is it's a journey. It's a journey of a learning process. It's new to all of us, and this journey begins at home, as many of us are at home, and we've primarily focused on the educational vertical. So we've kind of put it from the perspective of, the journey from home, what do you have to do at home? Questionnaires, mobile apps on your phone, temperature screening, things of this nature, until you get to the front door. And it could be the front door of your school, or it could be the front door of your office. And once we get there, what then can we do from an automated perspective to make things safer, automated, easier? And then once you kind of walk in through the threshold, then you're on premise. And at that point, how do we do contact tracing effectively, and how do we do congestion monitoring and alerting? So and we can do all of these things by applying some technology. And again, I'm going to sprinkle in some technology as we go through this webinar today. But today, the primary experience is really throughout the journey. At the same time, we want to worry about reporting, compliance, access controls, logging, privacy data, HIPAA concerns, and specific to California, I threw in SB 1159 just because that was kind of a big one that actually Evelyn brought up to us. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Just to start off, just to give a broad high-level view, what is this end-to-end solution that we're talking about? Again, at home, maybe it's a questionnaire on your mobile app. Then, once those questions are assessed, or it could be a questionnaire on a temperature sensing kiosk, then we're going to take that data, we're going to make sure that it's encrypted and it's secured, and we're going to make sure that we're not running into any HIPAA issues. And then once we get on-prem, what are the organization's roles? What type of remediation can we do? How can we look at room occupancy? And go ahead to the next slide. So, and as Brian talked about, there's really two parts of our solution here. There's the technology solutions, and then there's the non-technology solutions. So just to kind of start, just a super high level, what the technology solutions include, as we mentioned, Juniper Mist. We're leveraging Juniper Mist and APs and BLE sensors in those Juniper APs. We're using temperature sensing kiosks with facial recognition. We're using contact IO devices, which can be lanyards, or they can be other types of sensors. And then finally, we're dumping all of this information, all of these IoT devices, into Juniper Premium Analytics so that we can actually do something with this information. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. Hopefully I can talk better than I am right now today. But anyway, we've got 3 tiered solutions, good, better, best. And the whole idea here is we really want this thing to be modular and meet the needs of the organization. So you can start off simply. A good place to start might be a temperature sensing kiosk that's at the front door, and that's just a simple, quick check. And then we can add on to that with adding additional lanyards, wristbands, ID cards, all with BLE sensing capabilities. And this really creates granularity into where folks are going, where they've been, et cetera. And then finally, the best solution, we're going to take all of this, we're going to add Juniper Premium Analytics, and now we can actually even tie this into back-end HR systems so that you can have that logging and have that reporting. And then go ahead, next slide. And then finally, why we're here today. I wanted to kind of begin with the CDC guidelines, and this is specifically starting with schools. So we'll just I just wanted to put this up here, a few mitigation strategies. Evelyn or Susan, did you guys, I know that primarily you guys are work focused. Did you want to comment on anything around schools or childcare at this point?
No, I'm not comfortable. It's not my it's not in my purview actually, so.
Okay.
Same here. I mean, I have kids in school and I go through this at the board meeting. So it's definitely a challenging, agenda for the school districts. So I wouldn't even know where to begin on, what they're going through.
Okay, and that's actually great. So I pulled a few things off the CDC site, and here's some of the mitigation strategies that they recommend, which is masks in schools, social distancing, screening students for symptoms, cleaning, disinfection, hygiene, and then protecting, K-12 school staff. One thing I found interesting is there's a little bit more to it when we're talking about schools. And can you go ahead and just go to the next slide for a second? So there's some unique challenges around this whole school conversation versus employee or office based. And, a lot of it has to do with age levels. There's any student under the age of 2 can't be compelled to wear a mask. So there's just a whole lot more there that we just have to take into consideration rather than an employee coming to work. So here's just a few. Obviously contact tracing is the first topic here that we're talking about. The second is we just have to be careful that we're not excluding certain people. So what this really what this is around is the idea that the school should have a plan. How do you deal with students that can't maybe wear a mask or can't get their temperature taken? So you have to deal with some of these alternative answers. So, and then finally, just as a side note, symptom screening isn't intended to diagnose someone with COVID-19, but it's a place to start. Then hopefully you send them to the school nurse, which is a HIPAA controlled environment, and then they can make the actual determination from where to take it at that point. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. Now we're going to get into the good stuff. So this is where Evelyn and Susan are going to have to help me out here. So with this slide here, we just started off with the role of businesses and employers responding to COVID-19. And maybe we can start off with Susan. Maybe you can tell us, what has your experience been in trying to get Secure Matters prepared for dealing with COVID-19?
Sure. This obviously is a very fluid situation. We've, Brian has done a fantastic job just setting up the Carlsbad office to ensure that, we have the safety measures in place with the temperature kiosk, the, touchless hand sanitizer, and, providing masks for everybody. And so, we've gone through a few rounds of, sending communication to employees, and that's really key, is communicating with the employees to let them know, where we are in the process, what state, changes have happened since our last communication. So we've gone a few rounds of, okay, we're going to be opening the office on this date, and then, new state guidelines happen, and, new metrics come about. And so we've, constantly, kept up with state regulations to ensure that we are complying with the law and that we are doing everything we can to ensure the employee safety. So, my role in HR is just to make sure that I'm, following the state's guidelines and the mandates, and, working along with Brian to ensure that the office is, ready for employees when we are able to open back up, to bring employees safely back into the office. So, it's been 10 months, and we're hopeful for an early 2021 return, but again, that will be, determined by the states. So, that's kind of what we've done. And then, just, working alongside with Brian to make sure that we're both on the same page in regards to compliance and office safety.
That's awesome. And then Evelyn, I know you've been out there talking to a bunch of businesses. Can you share some of your experiences with the challenges around just all of this responding to COVID-19?
Sure. So as Susan put very well, 10 months, wow, right? Nobody expected it to last this long, but it has, and it changes what feels like almost daily. So we've put as well, and I do consulting, so I work with many clients and different industries, and not all of them can have kiosks, but we put as many preventative measures in place as possible, temperature checks, hand sanitizer everywhere, hand washing stations, as many as possible, and so on and so forth. But not only are we dealing with, trying to keep it safe, but what do we do when somebody does in fact test positive for COVID or show symptoms, and following the proper protocols and maintaining compliance with the reporting to the appropriate entities has become a bit of a myriad, and people get confused and employers become overwhelmed. So, I mean, the best thing I could say is that under SB 1159, which I believe is how we connected, Sam, you are required to report any positive workers' comp, any positive COVID claims to your workers' comp carrier. And it doesn't matter whether they contracted it at work or not. And it has to be on your OSHA 300. And you are required to report it to your local public health department, as well as, depending on the severity, if it's an outbreak, to potentially, in California, Cal OSHA. I actually this week had a client who, unfortunately, very sadly, somebody tested positive and the employee did in fact pass away. And people, it's overwhelming enough to lose somebody, let alone to have the wherewithal to make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. So that's extremely important as well. And so we walked him through that and got everything done. But it's a lot happening, and a lot of things to make sure that we check off every single box to make sure it's been done correctly, and expect to see what new box we might have to check tomorrow.
Oh, thanks. That's awesome. Well, not the story. That's sad, but thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And next slide, please. So here's a great one. What should I do if an employee comes to work with COVID-19 symptoms? Who'd like to take this one?
I'll be happy to. So definitely, assuming that everybody has put in place the protocols to determine these symptoms, send them home right away. Do not let them come in. Do not let them interact with any coworkers. Send them home. What also is unprecedented in the world of HR, and I'm sure Susan will agree with me, that we're allowed to know if somebody has COVID or not. HIPAA protects in many ways. As an employer, we're allowed to know, but at the same time, we cannot let other employees know that, John Smith did in fact test positive, which is difficult, especially depending on the size of your company. So you need to send that person home. You need to immediately notify all of your employees that they have been exposed without identifying who exposed them. Does that make sense?
That does, thank you. Okay, next slide. And here's another one. What is recommended to include in an employer's COVID-19 screening assessment? So I know, Susan, you talked a little bit about all the work that you and Brian did and Securematics did in preparing for dealing with just exactly this topic. And, you know, some of the things we can see here, you know, fever or feeling feverish. I highlighted that one. New cough, difficulty breathing, sore throat, muscle aches, etc., vomiting, new loss of taste or smell. We don't want to talk about the other issue there, but here's some screening assessment questions that you can ask and also some things that you can do. So let's just go ahead and go to the next slide for a second there. So here's where I get to just sprinkle in a little bit of technology. Earlier, we talked about health screening kiosks, and here's an example of the ones that we vetted and that we recommend. And what's really great about this is if you do utilize a temperature screening kiosk in this nature, you don't have to have an employee standing there with a temperature with a thermometer or a handheld temperature thermometer. Therefore, you don't have to expose them to a whole bunch of folks coming and going. It can be tied back in from a logging perspective and things of that nature. But also the great thing about these things, it's not actually taking a picture of people's faces. It's basically measuring 160 points on their face. It's then turning that into a file, basically, encrypting the file, going up into the cloud, and it's secured in the cloud. That way, anytime somebody walks back up, in about 3 seconds, it can identify who they are, do they have a temperature, and you can incorporate questionnaires on this if folks don't have a mobile phone. So it's a great way to get out of the requirement of having somebody to stand there, hand write down folks coming and going, much faster, much more efficient and automated. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And, you know, from that, this is again from the CDC site, they talk about workplace controls. So here's some of the top, you know, topics under that. Engineering has facilities and equipment. There's administrative controls, which can include cleaning and disinfection. There's training, administrative controls, and then personal protective equipment. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, and then I'll let my experts jump in. So on this slide, Susan, can you talk about, I know you talked about a little bit about some of the things that have been done around Securematics. Can you address some of the items on this slide?
I'm sorry, I still only see the engineering slide, so I'm not sure if it's on my end. But I can talk to the items that we, you know, have done at Securematics is, you know, the temperature kiosk, and putting posters throughout the office regarding social distancing and, you know, 6 feet apart, and kind of you know, rearranging the works. You know, there is social distancing office, and then just having, you know, hand sanitizer and wipes throughout the office easily. So if I'm looking at a different screen,
No, you're exactly right. So some of the facilities and equipment pieces basically address the, you know, potentially moving partitions around to improve traffic flow, removing and rearranging furniture and things of that nature. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So here's just a quick example of a technology. You know, this is actually coming from Juniper Mist Premium Analytics. And so what we can do with this is we can basically, from an engineering control perspective, we can create zones throughout an organization or a building, and then we can say so many people can be in section whichever, and you can see kind of the red section there. That's where somebody has actually gone beyond that policy. And these are policies that the organization gets to set. So you know, it's very flexible, and this is what's going to give us the tool to go, oh, we have a problem in this zone. So then we can address it with some of those engineering controls. We can change partitions, traffic flow, things of that nature. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So what we have here is earlier we mentioned the BLE beacons, the Bluetooth beacons. And what this does is in conjunction with Juniper APs, access points, and Bluetooth low BLE is Bluetooth low emitting yeah, I can't even say it myself. Basically with these BLE devices, low energy is what that is. You can actually take these lanyards and you're enhancing the accuracy of folks walking around. So if you put a lanyard, without them, the Juniper Mist APs are good for about 3 meters. With them, you can get it down to 0 to 1. So you're improving your accuracy with these BLE devices. Go ahead to go to the next one. And here's the next section in those controls, and it's really administrative. So Evelyn, did you want to add anything under the administrative section from a controls perspective?
From a controls, I think that, everything you have on the slide is it's very accurate and it works. I think that as employers and we have to be sensitive to the fears that our employees are going through and put a little bit of a human element into it while still complying with all the mandates and the controls that we put into place. Sometimes employees just want to be heard and reassured that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And then so again, I picked out just a few little pieces, so how we can actually, of course, I'm the technology guy, so I'm going to talk about how we can use technology to promote social distancing and congestion monitoring and telework, et cetera. So go to the next slide, please. Here's administrative controls continued. Again, earlier we talked about the cleaning and disinfecting, and we talked about training. I was wondering, Evelyn, does your company provide training in this arena?
As far as COVID, we partner with a safety company that does do all of this and can customize training specific to industry and company. And one of the things I failed to mention a couple of seconds ago is that there isn't, forgive me, there's been so many dates, I don't remember the exact date, but there's a new mandate in California that you are required to have a COVID prevention program in writing. It's in addition to your injury and illness prevention program. So you want to make sure that, and it's doesn't matter the size of an organization, that is required to be put into place. Again, just practicing what we preach is very important. I was at a client's where he's telling everybody to put on their masks and do all these things, and he's walking around without a mask. And practice what we preach and lead by example is extremely important in any organization when it comes to COVID specifically, because of all the mitigating factors that we have going on in our world today because of COVID.
Awesome. Okay. Next slide. And then, of course, personal protective equipment. We probably don't have to spend too much time on this, but I think just the story is, pick things that are appropriate for your organization and your workers. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to kind of shift gears here a little bit. A lot of that previous information, and I apologize, it's a ton of text because I don't know how to make pretty pictures and talk about this stuff too well. So, but we're going to shift gears and we're going to go into more of a state perspective. And I pulled this from a state map of just the differences that we're facing all over the United States. As you can see, and these are actual state bills related to COVID-19 that have passed. California, 157 bills, Florida, 2, Minnesota, 345. By the way, I just randomly picked these as an example. Montana, 0. New York, 472. New Jersey, 612. Ohio, 105, and Texas, 8. we're not going to cover these. I just wanted to demonstrate this is the challenge. It's just different from every state, all the way from, CDC down to your state, down to your actual, your county, et cetera. So this is what we're up against. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I just picked just a few just to kind of bring this point home, and we can just go over these super quick. I'm not going to talk about, we're not going to dig into them. Example, Alabama, contact tracing, privacy protections established. It is exactly what it says. It's related to contact tracing and protecting people's privacy during this activity. Next slide. Here's fair labor or fair employment practices. Basically saying if somebody has COVID and they don't report to work, the employer can't punish them in any way, basically. Next slide. So again, I'm just going to roll through these just as an example. Ohio, report and release certain COVID-19 testing information. So here it talks about the requirement to report and release certain COVID information. Next slide. Okay, here's where we've got our experts on with us, and this is a brand new California law, and it's called AB 685. So here I'll let I guess let's start with Susan. Susan, would you like to talk about this particular newest development?
Sure. So this new bill goes into effect January 1st of 2021. But a lot of the, compliance pieces of this bill is already in effect right now as it relates to the workers' comp bills. But it's expanded where it allows OSHA to come in and shut the business down without notifying employers if they are not, compliant with the law. It, requires employers to notify their employees within 1 business day if they have been around an employee who's tested positive. So it's a lot more strict than the SB. But it expands and, puts a little bit more requirements onto employers and to ensure that they are doing everything they need to do to ensure the safety of their employees. So Evelyn, do you want to add anything else to that?
You covered it very well, Susan. They're clamping down. It's like they're doubling down on what they've already passed, and they're going to hold people accountable, employers accountable. And it's my expectation when I've spoken to our partners in safety that Cal OSHA is going to be out in the field knocking on doors.
Okay, thanks. Can we move to the next slide? So I think that I tried to capture just some of the highlights of what this particular bill changed. And as both Susan and Evelyn commented, there's employer notification requirements to all employees. There's notification requirements for local public health agencies. And then again, as Susan mentioned, this starts January 1st, 2021. And Cal OSHA is the authority here. And you can also notice it's kind of interesting that it's until January 1, 2023. So we're looking at least a couple of years for this to be in effect. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm gonna let Evelyn jump in on this one if you don't mind.
Okay, so I jumped ahead earlier, but this is basically what I was speaking about on the prevention program that is now required to be written and for each employer. And you have it outlined very well. but it is required and it is in effect. And as I mentioned earlier, it is going to be, they're knocking on people's doors. So you need to have this prevention program written, meeting all the requirements that are outlined on the slide.
Okay, perfect. Yep. And as Evelyn said, you can see write and implement a COVID-19 prevention program, identify COVID-19 hazards. And this is interesting as well from a communication perspective. We're actually looking for input from employees and correct any hazards that are identified. And then also engage in contact tracing. So, basically we should be following any positive cases that involve exposure. And we touched on contact tracing previously, and we'll go into that a little bit more from an actual technology perspective. But I wanted to point that out that these things are actually implemented. And again, this is California, so it may not apply to everybody on the call, but wanted to make everybody aware that this is actually going on. And then require physical distancing, mask wearing, and improved ventilation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here's the continuation of this topic. Basically, I'm sorry. Yep, there we go. I just wanted to finish some of these things here. So high risk exposure. Basically, we're not going to allow folks to return to work if they're at high risk. This whole reporting conversation that we've been talking about, and it gives some definition there. We're reporting this to the public health department, and there's a lot of things around employee size as well. So here's an employer provided housing, talks about bed spacing, and then employer provided transportation, screening workers before boarding and requiring them to sit 3 feet apart and wearing face coverings. So really specific stuff. Go ahead and go to the next slide now. So before we dive into this, can you, Bailey, go ahead and do poll number 2? Okay, let's see. Okay, it looks like Internet of Things wins. Wow, that's interesting. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data tie. AR and virtual reality came in last. So actually, I'm in agreement. I think all of these are important, and I do think IoT is just going to continue to become a bigger and bigger factor. And so we can go on. Let's go back to the previous slide. So, and this is the reason I love that poll right there is here's a contact tracing live view. And what you're actually seeing, this is again a map, and you're seeing phones, you're seeing BLE devices, you're seeing pretty much anything that is transmitting. You can follow on this map so it's actually a real capability. And from an IoT perspective, this is just becoming even more pervasive. And this is how we can tell where folks are going. The other just quick comment about the lanyards and BLE devices from that perspective, why we like those is a lot of folks leave their cell phone sitting on their desk, for example. So you may not get the best level of accuracy if you just do mobile phones. Again, this is all in Mist Premium Analytics. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a picture of a user journey map. So we talked about we can do contact tracing with this. So you can create your zones, so you can do those congestion monitoring activities that we talked about. But then once the employee walks in, if they have a BLE lanyard on, for example, now we can kind of follow them around throughout the building, and we can basically automate this entire COVID or basically proximity tracing activity. Here's just a chart to show you who's been where. And go ahead and go to the next slide. And here's more details. So here's what's kind of, if you're curious about it, you see the devices. There's all these different types of devices. You can see the Galaxy phones. You can see iPhones. You can see laptops. You can see MacBooks. All of these things are actually data feeds that can be picked up. So there's quite a bit of information that we're able to see with this solution. And the key here as well is these are all devices. They're not tied to a person. So basically we don't have to disclose who that person was or who self-reported a positive test, but we can still go back and connect the dots and figure out who was in contact with this person. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And then finally, this is the congestion alerting piece where it's just giving you this actual report of what zone may have actually been oversubscribed. And then now we can take action. And I think that's the whole point of this, of the technology aspect of it. It's automation, but it's also a tool. So you can actually have visibility and then know, where you need to go to address a potential issue. So it gives you that control. Next slide. Okay, so moving on from the technology piece and diving right back into the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act. And I'm gonna let Evelyn kick us off on this conversation.
Okay, well, hopefully by now, all of everybody is aware of the FFCRA, which I'll summarize it. It came about because of the coronavirus, and it gave a reprieve to employees who were impacted by the virus. And it applies to all employers with 5 or more employees. I'm sorry, to all employers, which is a little different because most leaves most leaves were impacted employers with 50 or more employees in the past. But bottom line is you have to provide sick leave, and that is aside from the sick leave that is state mandated. It is separate from, depending on where you are in California, and other states have sick leaves as well, but California has certain counties and cities that have their own separate sick leaves. But the state requires a minimum of 24 hours. So the expanded sick leave under the FFCRA provides up to 10 paid sick days, or an average of, for part-time employees, in the event that you contract coronavirus. You now get that additional sick leave. And in addition to that, it expanded the FMLA as well. Can you go to the next screen? I think it's on the next screen. Is this the only screen we have, the only slide we have on this? I thought Can you guys hear me? Okay. Anyways, bottom line is you are required to, there are specifics that, and parameters around the expanded sick leave, and then there's parameters around the expanded, it's emergency paid sick leave and expanded FMLA. Sorry, I got my terminology incorrect. So it is important that employers that are not familiar with this become familiar, and you are required to post the postings that outline everything that's included in the FFCRA, where your employees can see it, where all your other workplace posters are, break rooms, what have you, but they have to be aware of their entitlements under the FFCRA.
Can we go to the next slide, Bailey, please?
Okay, so this, this is what I was talking. So under the expanded FMLA, there's no pay for the first 10 days. unless they can use their emergency sick leave. After 10 days, it's pay at 2/3 regular rate. And then there's job restoration. And I'm glossing over it, but I'm happy. I know that Sam will provide all my contact information, and I'm happy to answer questions. And so it basically, it's expanded what was prior known as the FMLA, and then it's added 10 days of emergency paid sick leave because so many people were impacted at the beginning and continue to be, quite honestly.
Okay, next slide.
So sorry, I flipped them. So emergency paid sick leave, again, it is the 10 days. It's all private employers. Doesn't matter. So in the past, certain leaves apply to how long you've worked at an employer, how many hours you've worked. That is not the case with the emergency paid sick leave. It doesn't matter how long you've been working for them or how many hours you've worked. You are day one, you are eligible for your emergency paid sick leave. Now, as of right now, all of this is supposed to expire 12/31. I don't see that happening. I have not received official word that it's going to be extended. Susan, I don't know if you've heard anything. I've been trying to stay on top of it and checking with all my sources. And have you heard if it's?
I've checked as well, and as of this morning, there has not been an extension put in place. But I can't imagine it not extending, to be honest. I foresee it at least extending for another 3 months, but nothing has come out to say that it's going to extend beyond 12/31 at this point.
Yeah. So I agree. And I can't fathom that they wouldn't, but I mean, if nothing else, 2020 has proved that nothing is impossible. So we shall see.
That's for sure. Okay, thank you. Next slide. And
This goes on to just explain the specifics.
Go right ahead.
And so one of the things, there are caps on how much employees can make under the paid sick leave. It does matter if you're a regular full-time employee or a part-time employee, and an average is done. And it can be a little convoluted. I've had to help several of my clients with it. And you have to do an average over 6 months of what the part-time person's worked. So, and you want to make sure, sorry, I throw things in because as they come to me, but you haven't already, you want to make sure that your payroll system is coding these correctly so that if you're a part of the PPP loan, it will be applied correctly, and you'll be able to justify where the money went. So all of these things, just one thing on top of the other.
Thanks. It's a lot of information, and I know everybody. There's a ton of information here, and we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. I spent, as you might imagine, a fair bit of time just researching, and there's even from the CDC site, and if anybody really wants to dig in on a particular thing, we'll get into that, or a particular rabbit hole, so to speak, we can certainly do that. But there's just so much information out there. It's pretty incredible. So, and that's again, talking from the federal level all the way down to the individual state and even, individual municipality. So.
One thing, just kind of an FYI, when this all first started, I went onto the CDC, and you can get alerts. So as things change, you can put yourself on a mailing list, and you get emails almost daily from the CDC for alerts as things change and evolve. Just a quick FYI.
No, that's a great tip. And I, just recently brushing up on just this presentation, I noticed that every category under the CDC has some kind of change. Maybe it's a new matrix, maybe it's a new new law that just popped up, or a new guidance document, and it goes on and on. So next slide. So that's a great segue. We've been talking a whole lot. You've allowed me to sneak in a bunch of little technology tidbits, but really the bulk of this presentation and this webinar is really around non-technology solutions. And of course, we've been talking about item number 4 primarily on this, but we also don't want to neglect the fact that we still need to address signage and placards. I think Susan talked quite a bit about how Securematics is implemented, touchless hand cleaners, provided other PPE gear, and then again, from that congestion, monitoring perspective, we can address physical layout and, where there's maybe congestion, maybe where we can move some desks around or move some partitions around to make traffic flow less congested. That's what physical layout's talking about. Okay, go ahead and move to the next slide. And just kind of go ahead and roll through this. It's a push as you go. So Susan, can you jump in and just talk about these items?
So as I mentioned, signage is really important, just to kind of reiterate, the company's goal to ensure that employees, are practicing, safe practices, with the hand washing and the social distancing. And just reminding them, some of the COVID-19 requirements. As you can see, there's a sign that says that we do require everybody that enters the office to get their temperature checked, and you can see the touchless sanitizer, and there's gloves and masks available throughout the office as well. But signage is really important, just to kind of, it's a little reminder for the employees. I'm sure they all know that, but just seeing it kind of reminds them, okay, I need to make sure I do all of that. So
yeah, that's great. And again, so these are all non-technology solutions. And in fact, you'll see at the bottom right-hand corner, there's actually even a temperature thermometer, a handheld temperature thermometer. Well, the whole idea there is we have implemented the temperature sensing kiosk, but if something doesn't seem to go right or there's any question, you've still got that manual backup if you need it. So I thought that was, a pretty positive thing to do, to have a backup to the technology. So then go ahead and go to the next slide. So you might be saying to yourself, wow, that was a lot, because I'm saying to myself, wow, that was a lot. So, and everybody, your organization has different customers, and a lot of the people on this call are partners, and you're out there trying to help your customers. So you may want to do some of this, you may want to do all of this, or you may want to do none of this. So that's why we're here. We're here to actually fill in the gaps. And the nice thing about this is that it's the technology piece is very end-to-end and modular. You can do a little bit of it, or you can do all of it. So with that in mind, the non-technology piece is kind of the same thing, but here's the basic process. We can help you go in and talk to your customers and evaluate their current state. And what I mean by that is exactly what it says. Pretty much everybody's probably done something. We want to go in, we want to figure out where they're at, what they've done, what do they care about as an organization, and then we can start there. Once we've identified what they've done, then we can bump that up against that myriad of potential, federal, state, and local regulatory requirements that they have to address. We can identify those for them. And with that, we can actually create, I call it a biosecurity program. This is your plan. This is actually your COVID response plan. So at this point, can't really do anything, without a plan. And this really goes kind of back to, if you've done disaster recovery or business continuity plans, if you've done cybersecurity plans, this is what we're talking about here. We're going to identify what needs to be done. And if the organization decides that they don't want to do a particular thing, well, then we're going to document that. And that's really for them. They can say, hey, we've looked at this from a business perspective, and we've decided to address it in whatever way that they've chosen to address it. And at least it's recorded. So if they do happen to get audited, then they've actually got that plan. So once that's done, we can go ahead and provide a regulatory compliance assessment. And again, as we've talked about, I think the theme of this is there's so much information out there, and it really is just all over the place, depending on your state, depending on your county, and a myriad of other factors. So we're here to help you walk through that piece and basically evaluate your specific scenario for your customer or yourself. Yeah, so we've put all this together. We've got a plan. We understand what you're up against. Then we can give you some recommendations around the design and even help you implement the solution. Once we implement the solution, finally, the last thing that we have to do is we have to provide support, monitoring, and alerting. So it's pretty comprehensive end-to-end plan. But again, if you've got all of these capabilities in-house, not to worry, that's great. We're here to support you, but we wanted to help add this, add these capabilities if you're missing them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we've actually gone through this quicker than I expected. So earlier today, the winner of one of the polls was the IoT, Internet of Things, as being the most, highest impactful thing. Well, Internet of Behaviors is actually a subset of IoT. And originally, it's actually not new. This used to be, it's probably a couple years old as a term. And what it really had to do with is the customer experience. And it was really focused on consumers walking into a store and maybe dwelling at an advertisement or some type of display in a store, and how we could capture that behavior and maybe send them, an instant coupon. So that's what this technology can do. It's kind of switched a little bit, and now we've applied it to COVID, and all of this technology has really come full circle. And this is how we're able to do some of this contact tracing and some of the congestion monitoring. But I still say that the companies that are out there that are addressing these things, from having the putting the effort into having the health screening kiosks, keeping their environment safe, it's going to translate to a customer. Customers are going to feel comfortable coming in. They're going to feel safer. It could lead to employee retention and even competitive advantages. And of course, you see company culture. So we're going to address all of that in another webinar as we continue to do these sessions. And then we're going to do a deep dive into Bluetooth low energy options. We talked about contact IO and MIST BLE sensors. And then finally, we're going to do a deep dive into extending Juniper MIST Premium Analytics. And really, this is third-party applications that we can leverage. So for the example I show here is wayfinding. And then finally, there's quite a few health screening technologies. So we're going to do a deep dive on kiosks and thermal cameras. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so at this point, again, if you have any questions, you can absolutely reach out to myself or Evelyn from an HR perspective, me from a technology perspective. And then we just kind of wanted to point out, we're going to put all of this information together for you guys if we do an analysis for you. But again, here's the little disclaimer: if you have a medical question, talk to your medical professional. If you have a legal question, talk to your legal advisor. So we don't want to claim that we're either of those. And at that, I don't know, Brian, are you? Would you like to hop on?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, guys. That was really good. I know we talk about this a lot. It's always fascinating to hear it again. It's so complex, whether it's the technology piece or I should say it's so complex when you first start looking at it. But I think you guys have done a great job of sifting it down to some very actionable items on the technology side and the non-technology side, right? The compliance side, if you will. How about, I know, Sam, you probably touched on this a little bit, but what about after COVID? Why is this also important, even beyond COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we get asked that question quite a bit. And the interesting thing, so we're putting in this technology, we're putting in Juniper access points, which has AI built in. So it's, just beyond the fact that it's a great wireless solution and you're going to get the benefit of that, you have the capability of leveraging these other pieces of technology to do all of these other things. And we touched on it just a tad bit, but for example, using Mist Premium Analytics and doing a third-party wayfinding app so people can find their way around, or repurposing your temperature sensing kiosk as a time checking device, or even as an access control device. You can actually use it to attach it to a door lock, for example, and you can do facial recognition and for allowing folks to enter or not. So there's a lot of useful applications beyond COVID-19.
Yeah, I agree, because we get asked that question asked a lot. If I'm going to invest so much time and money into the infrastructure, does that mean in 6 months everything goes away and I just may hedge my bets? And we always respond with what Sam responds with, as well as, forever we're going to need a COVID response. That's a plan that a school or a business has to have when the next outbreak happens, no matter what it is. It's just part of our new reality. So it's not, what I tell folks is, it's not like we just get to forget about it in 6 months. We're going to have that plan always, almost like an earthquake plan or an active shooter plan, or I always say it's like the TSA. That's not going away once the threat goes away. You're always going to be having to go through the TSA when you're at the airport. And I know it's a little bit controversial, these topics, but that's just kind of the reality. And we all have to be prepared for that. And as a person who's responsible for a business and keeping our employees safe and productive, our stance is, gone are the days where we could say, oh, so-and-so has the flu and it's okay to come in the office. And we're going to really be looking at, how do we move forward here with not accepting that reality anymore, and encouraging people to work from home or to call in sick, so the whole office doesn't get sick, right? That's part of our wellness plan. And we're actually helping our employees by giving them the tools to be able to do some predictive health screening on their own. It's all up to them. There's no employer involvement, but give folks the tools from a wellness perspective to both, stay healthy, but also when they're not feeling good, that they can have the option to work from home, or, like I said, take the sick day off. So anyway, those are things that we have to keep in mind, right, Susan? I think that's something that we've talked about for a while, and this whole COVID thing has kind of accelerated those discussions. But
right, and I think, being that, employees have been working from home, the past 10 months, it's a lot easier to say, you know what, just stay home, don't come into the office, and you can still be productive at home if, you are well enough to work. So, companies are definitely at an advantage now, because everybody's been doing this for the past 10 months, and they've seen that you can still be productive at home if you're able to work, and, keeping employees that are in the office, safe. So, I think this has kind of given us the opportunity to see everybody's capabilities to work remote.
right, and I know it's a little corny to say, but it's very, very true, is that our employees are, our best asset in the company, and especially a small company. So we want to make sure that everyone's protected. We want to make sure everyone's productive. We want to make sure everyone's happy too, and they don't feel like they're going to lose their job if they do work from home, because quite frankly, when any company you contact, when you're talking to an employee of that company, you can tell right away what the culture is of that company, whether it's good or bad. And we want to make sure that we're always in a position to reflect the best for Securematics and our customers. and we proudly have done so. And I think what's very cool about it is we responded extremely quickly to this whole COVID situation by having people, buying people equipment to work from home while we kind of sorted out what was going on. So we acted very, very early, and we were fortunate we did. And I feel really proud of the team to be able to do that. And like Sam and Susan have said, we've outfitted the office for that day. And we started back, Susan, in May or June of this year. And we've gone through a lot of the wrinkles, and our whole idea is to create a showcase with our office as our customers and our partners may ask us about, what did you guys do in particular? So that's something that we pride ourselves in as well. So I just hope everyone got something out of this. We're continuing the series. The next FastTRAC we're going to go through, our webinar, is going to go a little deeper in the technology. Now we've been through the compliance piece of it. And so that's going to be really intriguing. And again, the key is that we ourselves at Securematics have deployed a lot of this technology. We've been through, right, Sam? We've been through kind of the war of doing that. And our whole goal is to simplify it, make it digestible for you. And I have to tell you, when we started this, it was very complex, a little bit confusing. We started our technology journey with COVID. But I think we've got not only we've got the secret sauce and the formula now to make it simplistic, but we also have some technology partners out there that we've partnered with that have helped in this overall solution. So anyway, I want to thank Evelyn for joining us. Evelyn, your information I think is available somewhere, right? Because you're a valuable resource.
Thank you.
In this whole picture. So I encourage you to, engage Evelyn. And she's been a very big help to us understanding this as well. Susan, thank you for kind of sharing your story of what we've done at Securematics and all the stuff you've learned. I mean, we text each other back and forth a lot about kind of the work and the non-work part of it, because we all have kids, and that's a very important thing too, is to make sure our kids are staying sane through this whole thing, and we give them the extra attention because it's scary for them as well. And Sam, also, thank you for kind of being that bridge, being that bridge between the technical and the non-technical part. Now, remember what I said in the beginning is that, we've all had to become experts since March. And I could tell you that Evelyn and Sam and Susan and our company has really, really gone in head first. So again, if there's something that you'd like us to engage directly with your customer, if you're not that familiar, if you're one of our partners, we're more than happy to do that. And that's part of the service that we provide at Securematics. So with that, we'll give you back part of your day. Thank you again for attending. Thanks to the panel, and look forward to seeing everyone, or at least presenting to everyone on the next FastTRAC, and also have a safe and happy holiday as well. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.